The Ohio River, it is at risk. In fact, a new report says it is the second most endangered river in the nation.
Pollution and flooding brought on by climate change put clean water for millions at risk.
Imagine standing by the Ohio River, once strong and powerful, sending nearly half of its water into the Mississippi at Cairo, Illinois. Fast and full of life, it carried water across the heart of the country. It wasn't just a river, it was a lifeline. The Ohio River hasn't simply been a line drawn on a map. It has been the pulse, the promise, the lifeline for the entire Mississippi basin. But now, that lifeline has become fragile. In early 2026, the Ohio River region is experiencing a drought both severe and historic. What was once a mighty rush has slowed to a mere trickle. The numbers that once seemed immutable, 50%, half of the Mississippi's total flow at its confluence, have been replaced by a new and chilling statistic. The Ohio now supplies only 8%. The silence along the shore is profound, and its implications ripple far away from these banks. Climate-induced droughts are strangling the Ohio's flow. Some communities watch the water recede, remembering floods not so long ago. Now, the riverbed bakes in sunlight, and the sound is a whisper instead of a roar. Few imagined the Ohio's collapse could arrive with such speed or such finality. How did America's most important tributary, the backbone of commerce and agriculture, dwindle to a shadow of its former self? What does it mean, not just for those who live along its winding course, but for a country built on the river's promise? What unseen forces brought the Mississippi's lifeline to the brink? The rise and rule of the Ohio. The Ohio River has been referred to as the Mississippi's lifeline, and for good reason. For generations, the Ohio has gathered together the flows of its far-reaching basin, collecting rainfall and snowmelt from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio, threading these countless tributaries into one of the continent's essential arteries. Two great rivers, a consequence of vast geography and rainfall, meet in one place. And it is the Ohio, surging westward, that provides more water than the upper Mississippi itself. Historically, up to 50% of the Mississippi River's flow at their confluence has come from the Ohio. This story is written into the land's memory. Native Americans traveled its gentle bends, trading goods and knowledge. Early European settlers floated downstream past untamed forests and riverbank prairies, marking the Ohio as the border between old worlds and new frontiers. As industry grew, so did the Ohio's role. Coal and steel from the east, grain and timber from the heartland, spreading across the continent by barge or steamboat, following the river's path. For commerce, the Ohio has long been a natural highway. Before roads stitched the nation together, barges and boats moved goods between towns, cities, and distant coasts. For farmers, the river's seasonal floods enriched soil. For downtowns, it brought workers and visitors, becoming the meeting ground for trade and celebration. Yet beneath these visible benefits, the river's power has always been a finely balanced act. Rainfall against drought, upstream demands weighed against downstream needs. When the Ohio's flow changes, every community downstream of Cairo feels the effect. The fate of agriculture, industry, and millions of people is intertwined with the unpredictable rhythms of the waterway. Writers and pilots have called the Ohio America's River of Destiny, shaping both landscapes and lives. For indigenous peoples, it was both boundary and sustenance. For generations of settlers, it was a natural divide. Today, it remains crucial for drinking water, navigation, power generation, and recreation. Its constancy woven into the economic, social, and ecological fabric of the region. Yet, even across centuries of boom and bust, of flood and drought, few expected the river's defining crisis to arrive in the form of absence, not excess. A catastrophic decline unfolds. Fast forward to early 2026. The Ohio River, once delivering close to half of the Mississippi's flow at Cairo, is now providing just 8%. Picture the battered riverbanks. Where barges once jostled for docking space, the quiet is heavy. Sandbars and river stones, long hidden beneath silt and current, emerge in the low water. submerged logs and scraps of old industry break the surface, now picked over by curious birds. Communities that grew up singing the river's praise find themselves at a loss. River festivals are cancelled. Waterfront parks sprawl into cracked mud, playgrounds and picnic spaces now stretching toward the dry riverbed. Once busy marinas sit still, their docks listing at odd angles, boats stranded far from the channel. People wander down to take in the spectacle, not in celebration, but in uneasy silence. The change has not been gradual. It is a dramatic collapse, and the region is still catching its breath. What is to blame for this sudden drop? Most look to the relentless drought gripping the upper Ohio basin, a drought more severe than any in living memory. For months, clouds have been scarce and rainfall has vanished, leaving fields dusty and river gauges plummeting. Water stress that once seemed a distant possibility is now a daily crisis. The consequences are clear in every town and city that draws life from the river. Fishermen mutter over their empty inlets. Water managers scramble as intake pipes dip below critical thresholds. Families draw water under rationing orders, and garden hoses grow dusty with disuse. Notices go out: conserve, reduce, prepare. Even commercial barge operators struggle as shallows and sandbars make passage unpredictable. And the impact isn't confined to the Ohio itself. Every community along its banks, from Pittsburgh to Louisville, Evansville to Paducah, now faces the same question. When does adaptation become survival? For the first time in lifetimes, the river's adequacy is in real doubt. Only a year before, in April 2025, warnings of severe flooding echoed across the basin as the Mississippi and Ohio claimed historic highs. But fate's swing is capricious. The seasons have turned. The pendulum did not just swing back, it snapped, thrusting the region from flood to unprecedented drought. Some ask, how could a contract between river and region, centuries old, unravel so rapidly? Echoes of lifeblood lost. A stroll along the Ohio is now a study in contrasts. Fishermen remember when the river teemed with walleye and catfish, with paddlefish lurking where the channel deepened. Today, shallow strands force fish to cluster in shrinking pools. Wading birds stalk along broad mudflats where water once glittered in the sun. Nature itself strains at the change. Mussel beds, once abundant, cling precariously in isolated puddles. Amphibians cry from drying wetlands, while deer and small mammals pick cautiously along the exposed banks, seeking water. Cities built for a river's rhythm, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Louisville, contend with the undependable flow. Barge pilots adjust to ever-shifting depth charts, making each day a gamble. Some factories, with water intakes now exposed to air, must contemplate expensive new wells or curtailed production. Traffic that once went by river is now forced onto packed highways and crowded rail lines, driving up costs across the region. Reduced flow does more than inconvenience. The economic toll spreads as barge operators, critical to the movement of grain, fuel, and material, face delays and liability risks. Marina owners, tourism businesses, and even riverside restaurants watch demand evaporate along with the water. Small towns, once reliant on river festivals and recreation, see business wither. And far downstream, at Cairo itself, the sight is jarring. Where the Ohio once met the Mississippi with force, an infusion of strength and speed, there is now only a weak merging, a subdued mingling of waters more brown and turbid than blue. The loss is no longer speculation. It is visible and real, as palpable as the whispering wind along the exposed stones. Commerce, crisis, and chain reaction. What does it mean when America's main river loses its vital tributary? The story is not limited to hydrologists or river towns. It touches every aspect of the regional and, in many ways, the national economy. The Ohio, once responsible for carrying an estimated 50% of flow at Cairo, enabled deep draft barge traffic, essential for transporting grain, soybeans, coal, and petroleum to ports across the world. Now, at only 8% of its former contribution, commercial shipping is upended. Barge operators are forced to light load, carrying less, traveling more slowly, risking groundings. The entire route from Illinois to the Gulf becomes less predictable and more costly. Profit margins narrow, insurance risks climb, and shipping schedules buckle under uncertainty. Every delay or mishap blows back through the supply chain, stressing warehouses and local highways, causing prices to climb for goods once moved efficiently by river. For agriculture, the consequences are stark. The river system has always provided low-cost bulk transport. Without that option, crops risk being stranded, prices rise, and farmers face new hardship. The effects are felt far from farm gates, down the line in grocery stores and fuel depots, in kitchen pantries and commercial silos. Heavy industry also struggles. Power plants, chemical refineries, and paper mills all depend on reliable, abundant water. As the river level falls, many face costly adjustments or outright reductions in output. Riverfront cities spend on temporary pipelines or drill new wells, costs that often end up on consumers' bills. Recreation and community life are also diminished. Where once riverboat casinos and dinner cruises filled the docks with energy, now the water is too low to float their holds. Birdwatchers, kayakers, and campers find their favorite stretches dried up and closed off. The social and emotional costs, while harder to measure, are equally significant. All this stemming from the loss of the Ohio, a river once trusted to deliver both water and opportunity. History's lessons, nature's warnings. It's not the first crisis to visit the Mississippi or its essential tributaries. Every generation has stories of disaster, floods that overwhelmed levees, droughts that baked the soil. Only 1 year before this drought, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was warning of flooding in the Ohio River Basin, chasing high water with emergency effort and engineering. That cycle, the lurching balance between flood and drought, has shaped the region's history. But rarely has the swing been so wide or so rapid. Never has the Ohio's flow collapsed so precipitously from near-record highs to near-record lows over so brief an interval. While climate patterns are complicated, the signs point to a new energy in weather's variability. High-pressure domes, shifting rainfall, and persistent droughts now seem more frequent, more severe, and less predictable. Even when storms arrive, they increasingly skirt the basin's headwaters, leaving key tributaries dry. At the same time, human demands upstream add pressure. Cities grow, fields expand. Every year sees more water withdrawn for irrigation, cooling, or daily use. As these competing needs intensify during drought, less makes its way to the river, amplifying its strain. Blame can be debated, but the reality cannot. The Ohio is not the endless provider it once seemed. Lessons from history and warnings from scientists are suddenly urgent, demanding a re-examination of how water is shared, used, and valued across the basin. The Mississippi's struggle, a giant brought low. The troubles don't stop at the junction of the Ohio and the Mississippi. The Mother River itself, winding over 2,300 miles from Minnesota to the Gulf, now presses on with a fraction of its former strength. At Cairo, the effect is dramatic. Formerly, the arrival of the Ohio marked a remarkable transformation. The Mississippi would surge, emboldened by the infusion. Barges could count on depth and current to speed south, and cities downstream drew comfort from the river's power. Now, the convergence is subdued, the big river running lower, slower, and less predictably. Dredging increases in a frantic attempt to maintain navigation, a daily struggle as sediment builds in shallows once swept clean by rain-swollen flow. Channel management becomes reactive and expensive. Barge captains thread their way with increasing caution, and shipping schedules wobble. A new risk grows at the river's mouth: saltwater intrusion. When fresh water declines, the Gulf pushes in. Water treatment plants in Louisiana and Mississippi work overtime, striving to keep briny taste from city taps. The lengthening tongue of salt threatens agriculture near the coast, altering soil and groundwater. Ecologists warn of consequences for wildlife. A sudden shift in water chemistry can disrupt spawning and migration for countless riverine species. Erosion increases as formerly saturated banks dry and loosen. The foundation of the river's ecology is unsettled. All the while, communities up and down the system grow wary. They have seen high water before, and low water too. But this persistent absence, this prolonged thinning of the river, test their resilience as never before. Downstream dominoes, life on the edge. When a river the size of the Ohio collapses, waves of consequence wash far downstream. Fishing communities near the Gulf notice changes. Freshwater fish are displaced or decline. Commercial shrimpers monitor the creeping line of salinity, knowing their catch depends on the river's resistance against the encroaching sea. Drinking water intake threatens, forcing some towns to explore costly alternatives. Upstream, farmers from Arkansas to Missouri to Illinois face uncertainty. Wells are drawn lower, aquifers strain, and crops dry at the edges. The cost of irrigation rises and insurance claims spike. Some communities debate next steps, caught between conserving for now and fearing for the future. Tourism economies, once bolstered by river recreation and festivals, erode. Local marinas offer discounts as slips sit empty. Riverboat excursions run at limited capacity. Hospitality businesses along the banks, restaurants, hotels, outfitters, struggle as water levels make recreation and fish harvest less certain. Wildlife managers brace for environmental shifts. Delta marshes and inland wetlands contract as saline water creeps north, threatening migration and spawning grounds. Bird counts decline in some reserves, and native plants face stress as water tables drop. Legal fights erupt between states over water rights and priorities. Across the valley, communities ask hard questions. Who gets priority as resources shrink? Cities, farms, or wildlife? What traditions must be set aside to adapt? And will the rains return in time to mend what has been lost? Turning points and unanswered questions. With the Ohio's contribution now at 8%, the entire Mississippi system feels the disruption. The uncertainties grow sharper, the debates more urgent. Are these conditions just the far end of a natural cycle, or a marker of lasting change? Will the river's flow rebound as it has after past droughts, or has something fundamental shifted, leaving previous abundance behind? If and when the rains finally come, will cities and farms already have committed to higher extraction, keeping the river low? Community forums and legislative halls debate policy fixes, emergency conservation, long-term water agreements, technical innovations such as pipeline networks or enhanced storage. Some advocate forest and wetland restoration in the upper basin, hoping to recharge aquifers and nudge the cycle back toward abundance. Other voices worry about precedent, wary of promising more than nature can deliver. Dredging and regulation may buy time, but cannot replace rain. Water sharing plans can offer equity, but not guarantee supply. Even the Great Lakes, sometimes mentioned as a source, are themselves protected and limited. Confronted with loss, resilience and innovation will be tested as never before. And hanging over all is an uneasy realization. If the Ohio, a river so central, so foundational, can shrink to a shadow, then what lies ahead for the rest of the nation's rivers and communities?